Hello, I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and this is the Intuitive Pool Podcast, where together we'll embrace the plans we did not make yet, unfold businesses and lives that are so much greater in wealth in all ways than any business or life plan could ever achieve. My wish is that you make intuition your most trusted advisor. So buckle up, get present, and let's go. Ooh, I'm excited to record this episode. As always, I've now got with the program that these episodes come because I'm intuitively pulled to record them. Not surprising when the podcast is called The Intuitive Pool. What else did I think, really? So there are 3 episodes this week. One was released a few days ago, The Wholehearted Man. I have a beautiful, powerful interview booked in with Susan Knapp on Friday, which is going to blow your mind as it blew my mind when I first met her. And now this episode that was intuited in a very joyful conversation with a friend of mine called Penny. Hi, Penny. So the theme of this episode is living life in the overflow. And that is actually the theme of my life this year and of my clients, our coaching group. It is overflow. So, of course, I'm going to speak to it on the podcast. So there's 2 main points that I want to make about living life in the overflow. First of all, it is the direct result of following the intuitive pull. Living life in the overflow is the direct result from following the intuitive pull. Now, I want to acknowledge that for some people, when they're following the intuitive pull, there may be lack in their lives, there may be limitation, there may be pain, there may be crisis going on. And I've certainly experienced that in the past. I've certainly been in crisis and I followed the intuitive pull. And what I want to say is that when we follow the intuitive pull, when we are in those places of lack and limitation and crisis, our focus changes and our energy changes. And I want to talk about the opposite experience of that. Have you ever noticed what happens when you focus on, in inverted commas, healing? Have you noticed what happens when you've focused on, inverted commas, removing blocks? Have you observed what happens when your friends or colleagues have focused on healing and removing blocks? Now, there is a time and place for that, absolutely. And the irony is that this is what happens as a result of following the intuitive pull. My point is that the more you focus on healing and removing blocks, the more you end up in this never-ending whirlpool of more healing and more blocks and more healing, more blocks. And because your focus is there, that's the reality that you experience. Whereas you can absolutely acknowledge that these things may exist in your life. As I said, I have had moments of crisis in my life that the intuitive pull was the gateway to freedom. Absolutely the gateway to freedom. Not what I thought I should do, not what the experts told me to do, not what any rational, justifiable to the mind thinking had me do. It was following the intuitive pull. Even in those times of crisis and lack, that was my gateway to freedom. It was the game changer. So when you follow the intuitive pull and you're absolutely present to owning up to where you've forgotten who you really are and you've bought into the stories, because the intuitive pull is so generative, and that's the word that's been with me since Monday in my meditation on Monday. This word generative has just been alive in my world and in my conversations with clients. Because the intuitive pull is so generative in its creativity, in being of service to self and others, in the impact that it has, in the joy, the vibration of joy that is so energizing, so creatively energizing, that it quietens those stories. The upper supersedes the lower. It supersedes that high vibe energy, supersedes the thinking that you need to heal, in inverted commas. or remove blocks in inverted commas. It supersedes that. So why not go to the higher versus the lower? So that's the first point I want to make. The second point that I want to make is when you are following the intuitive pull, you are opening up to living life in the overflow. You are so full of high vibe energy, creativity, service, joy, as I've previously mentioned, that in that moment, there is no need, there is no lack, there is no agenda, and there is no strategy. Isn't that amazing? When you're following the intuitive pull, even if the minute before you were thinking about lack and you were thinking about pain, when you were following the intuitive pull in the now, there is none of that. There is no need. There is no lack. There is no agenda, and there is no strategy. And the lack of agenda and strategy refers to a previous episode that I recorded around the idea that, excuse me, this silly post-COVID cough is still with me. It refers to a previous episode where I talk about, do you use strategies to rescue you? Do you use strategies to rescue you? When you follow the intuitive pull, you live life in the overflow. Your cup is so full, it is overflowing. It is so full of all those high vibe energies that I've just spoken about, that the need to have agenda or strategy in order to get something is non-existent. And the irony of that, is that because your cup is overflowing with those high vibe energies, you get reflected back in your reality that exact experience in all the ways that matter to you the most. When I had the intuitive pull to create a podcast, because it was never in the plan, I'd been writing a book. I've got 25,000 words written down, and it is incomplete, and it does not have the energy that this podcast has. I don't have the energy towards that book as I do towards the podcast. So the podcast was never in the plan. And I followed the breadcrumbs, and then I realized, oh, there's a podcast to be created. I never created this podcast with an agenda or strategy to grow my business. Yes, absolutely. I was open to that, but it was not for that purpose. It was for the purpose of experiencing my joy in sharing what I have come to know in life. And that has been something that I've been doing since Facebook first began. I would write pieces of wisdom that I'd gathered over my life. And I love writing and I love sharing. And so I would write that on Facebook, and I created a Facebook page when Facebook first began. And this was prior to the days where you had to pay for your posts to go out through advertising. And I think I gathered about 3,400 inverted commas fans on that page, simply because I loved to write. I loved to capture the wisdom that I was amassing through my process, in observation of my clients' process. And I'd love to share that. I'd love to see how people responded and how it inspired them or gave them ideas. The podcast is the same. It's just taken a different form. That's why I do the podcast, because I absolutely love to speak to what I have come to know through my experience and through the observation of my clients' experiences. And I love the impact that it's making. And I so want this podcast to go out as far and wide as it possibly can, because I want it to have a breadth of impact that I've not been able to experience until now, until tomorrow, until the next day and the next day. That's why I record these episodes, for that reason. And because my cup is overflowing in joy, I have people write to me and say, I'd like to talk to you about coaching. And then I say to them, why don't you have a listen to some of the episodes before we speak? And then I hear back, I did. And that's actually why I'm reaching out to you now, because I know it's time. Or other times where I've had people come to me and say, it's through that episode when you talked about momentum serving the committed, and you talked about the cave you fear to enter. And I realized that I want to live my life following the intuitive pull, not just sometimes, but all the time. And I can feel there's something really creative that wants to come through from that place. I can feel something big that wants to be born from the intuitive pull. And so can we work together? Now, what joy, what unexpected, delightful, overflowing joy, full of love, full of service, full of impact, full of connection, full of depth that has arisen from me following the intuitive pull. Now, I also know through my own meditations this year that there is so much more to happen. There is so much more to happen. I have a very strong sense that through this podcast, some incredible opportunities that I can't even fathom now are going to arise. It's just how it happens when you have a theme called overflow and you're living from the intuitive pull. It's the only reality that can be imprinted in your world, or in my world, in our world, when we are coming from this place of source of living and following the intuitive pull and living from the overflow. It is the only world that can exist when that is the focus and the commitment. And I have absolutely committed to having this podcast go as far and wide as possible. I mean, why would I create a podcast if I'm being lazy and I'm just not having any commitment to it reaching as many people as possible? And so one of the intuitive pulls that I've received this year is to really upgrade my skills around social media. So I've created a really profitable business through social media, through posting, simply posting. I've posted since 2013 with attachments to offering to coach with me, and referrals have come from that place as well. And very, very grateful to have a really awesome, profitable business as a result of that. And now I'm upping my skills. I want to learn more about how to use this amazing vehicle of social media to reach more and more and more and more people, such that this podcast goes as far and wide as possible. So that's actually a third point that I didn't plan on saying. And I'm saying it because I know the importance of allowing yourself to be in the fullest version of your leadership, and to not playing humble and not having any false humility. And yes, I will own up to, there are times when I'm posting a whole lot more now, and I think to myself, oh, I'm posting too much. Oh, what will people think of me? And then I have to catch myself and let that go, right? The intuitive pull is to be in the fullness of my leadership so that it can have the biggest impact that I can possibly make. And so with you, are you allowing yourself to be in the fullness of your leadership? Are you allowing yourself to be in the fullness of the impact that you're here to make? And what do you need to do from a commitment point of view? What are you choosing to commit to? If the answer is yes, I'm choosing to be in the fullness of my leadership, and I'm choosing to be and create the most impact that I possibly can make. What are you committing to? Because as I spoke about in a previous episode, momentum serves the committed. How do we achieve momentum? We can only achieve momentum through commitment. Without commitment, as I owned up to in that episode, I have struggled with my weight because at a place of cause, I actually was not committed to my physical health as I've been committed to my work, for example. Where is the commitment? Where is the commitment pulling you into? What is the commitment pulling you into? And where is the overflow in your life this year? Where can you see your cup overflowing in joy and service and connection, leadership, love, creativity, impact, and holding space for that to arrive in your world this year? How? By following and creating space. Let me say that differently. By creating space for the intuitive pull to arrive and following it. Again, on a previous episode, I talked about I commit to my energy first. I give myself all of Mondays. I don't have sessions until most days 11 o'clock in the morning. I belong to a mastermind. I have sessions, group calls in that mastermind and one-on-ones with my coach. And I think I counted up to about 20 hours per week of committing to my energy first. I therefore have the space to listen. I therefore have the space to receive the intuitive pulls. And also my level of presence is acute. And so when I'm having conversations like I had this morning, I can see, there's an amazing episode that I'm pulled to create. Living life in the overflow is the direct result from following the intuitive pull. How committed are you to that? Like, really? Are you semi-committed, quasi-committed, happy to follow the intuitive pull every now and then? Happy to be plugged in, tuned in every now and then? Hey, I've been there. I've been there where I've been intuitively plugged in because I needed to be, because there was lack. I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about living your life following the intuitive pull. And the irony is that it removes lack and need. That's the irony. That's the irony. And it's the opposite to what we would normally do in our humanness when there is lack and need. Normally, what we would do in our humanness when there is lack and need is we would bunker down and do what makes sense and what is sensible. I'm not talking about being sensible at all. I'm also not talking about being reckless, right? I'm not talking about being ungrounded, because this is a conversation about both heaven and earth. We are also in this physical human body, this vehicle that allows us to experience who we really are. And I'm talking about the higher over the lower. So regardless of what the rational mind says, when the intuitive pull presents itself, do you surrender? Do you surrender? And you know what? Surrendering to the intuitive pull is the number one cause of living life in the overflow. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks, Penny, for co-creating it with me through our conversation this morning. As I told you in our conversation, this has inspired an episode, and I'm glad that I made time today to record it. Sending you lots and lots of love. Bye. A little postscript. I just finished editing that part of the episode, and I read a message that I'd received whilst I was editing it. Hi, Giselle. Been meaning to write to say I am loving the intuitive pull. I've listened to them all a few times. I wouldn't mind chatting soon to hear about what it's like to work with you. I haven't had a coach for a good year now, and I'm feeling like you have some points of view that could help me with all the intuitive pulls I'm feeling for 2022. And it goes on. So if that is not evidence of the overflow, when there is no need and there is no agenda and we're not doing things in order to get things, we're doing them because we are intuitively pulled and because it feels so good to be in this expression of ourselves, I don't know what is. What a perfectly timed message. Look forward to speaking to that person who wrote to me. May it inspire many intuitive pulls in your life. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. I trust that you were intuitively pulled. If you like this episode, please follow this podcast and share the love with your family, friends, and colleagues. Let them know that I'm here. And if you'd like to have more communication with me, join the Intuitive Pull Facebook group, where you'll find details in the show notes, and you can let me know about what pulls you've been receiving by listening to these episodes. Until next time, so much love.